an advocate for dam removal and river restoration, and it's been like riding a tortoise. And all of a sudden now there's rocket fuel. So we're very excited about this Army Corps of Engineers study. And Ryan, tell us all about it. This is, as Art would say, once in a generation opportunity ahead of us.
Make sure to keep that right up next to your mouth. Okay. And just advance with this part. Okay. That should work. Yeah, it does. All right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hello. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to just take a picture of the group from stage. My daughter, she just sent me a video. She's in preschool, and she did an Irish jig today, and I'm sure she was super nervous, so I have to show her what I was doing today. Can everybody hear me fine? Is it okay? Hold it closer? Okay. So my name is Ryan Johnson. I work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Chicago District. I don't live in Chicago. I live in Kane County on the Fox River. So I'm invested in this work as much as all of you folks are as well. I'm excited to present today a study that was recently revitalized. It's the Fox River Habitat and Connectivity Study, which is being conducted under the Section 519 authority for the Illinois River. So thank everybody for taking some time to listen today. So I want to give the update today on where this study sits, but I really want to leave time for questions at the end because I think a lot of folks might have a lot of questions. As Art said, this is once in a generation opportunity. So I think there's a lot at stake here, and I want to make sure to provide an opportunity for y'all to ask questions. So as many of you know, the Fox River used to be a free-flowing, diverse, heterogeneous river, and during European settlement, folks came in and built a lot of dams for a lot of good reasons. Those dams were drivers of economy, they powered mills, and it served a lot of other important functions. However, today, those dams aren't serving a lot of those functions that they originally served. They're still serving functions that people are super tied to. A lot of them are in the downtown areas of these older municipalities, and they're a real iconic piece for a lot of these municipalities, especially in that central section of the river that I think Jenny and some others have spoken about earlier today, where the dams are really concentrated. There's been a lot of research done by the Fox River Study Group, Illinois DNR, and all of you great folks out here, showing the adverse impacts of dams and impoundments on free-flowing rivers. So in general, dams result in lower native species richness, lower diversity, and generally segment populations of fish, mussels, macroinvertebrates. So in general, I think it's pretty well understood the adverse impacts of dams on free-flowing rivers. And here you can just see Carpentersville Dam, one of the many dams in Kane County along the river, has an impoundment behind it. And down in the corner, you can see a free-flowing section of the river just below, I believe, the Algonquin Dam. So, lucky for us, the Rock Island, St. Louis, Chicago, and Detroit districts of the Corps, along with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources as the non-federal sponsor, completed the Illinois Basin Restoration Comprehensive Plan in 2007. There's been some additional authorities that have gone on to provide additional research and laying the groundwork for the current study that we're resuming now. And Congress provided additional authority for Illinois River Basin Restoration in Section 519 of the Water Resources Development Act. Lucky for us again, and the Fox River is a tributary of the Illinois River, and so any restoration work on the Fox River can dip into the funds that were authorized under Section 519 of the Illinois Basin Authority. Here you can see the study reach that this study that I'm presenting today covers. So we're not covering the entire Fox River, but more focusing on that reach of the river where the dams are super highly concentrated. So you can see here the entire Fox River watershed, our study reach, and the dams are indicated by the red triangles along the way. So here's an additional map a little bit closer up of the study reach that we're looking at for this study. You can see each of the dams is called out along the way, and you can see the watersheds for each of the tributaries along the river. Okay, so the next thing that I want to focus on, I think we've established the adverse impacts of dams on river ecology. So how does the Corps of Engineers approach ecosystem restoration, including this study, which looks at habitat connectivity along the river? So first we have a feasibility stage. It can last anywhere from 12 to 18 months, oftentimes longer. And that's where this current study sits today. The study was initially kicked off in 2013 or 2014. I'll be honest, before my time with the Corps, but it was paused in 2015. I think folks have mentioned before, Illinois didn't have a budget for a while, and the non-federal sponsor for this project was the Illinois DNR, so funding ran out. However, thanks to the great work of some folks here, the Fox River Study Group was able to acquire funds and provide those funds through the DNR to the Army Corps of Engineers to kickstart the study again. So the study was resumed last year, and we've been working feverishly on our hydrologic models and on outreach to the municipalities and finishing up our feasibility report. So in that feasibility report, what we're really doing is we're looking to see if there's a federal interest in completing this project. So we're assessing different alternatives to meet our objectives, and I'll go over those objectives in the next slide. And if there is determined to be a federal interest, then we are able to complete our report and send it on to U.S. Army Corps headquarters in DC, where hopefully it will be approved. Once the study is approved, then Congress can give funding, and we can move on to the design and construction phase of the project. So for this project in particular, from the milestones we're looking at, we're hoping to finish a draft of our feasibility report in September of 2023. At that time, we would release it for public review. So all of you great folks could look at it, all of the agencies and all of the residents that live in the municipalities. Quite frankly, anybody can review it at that time, provide comment and feedback to the Corps of Engineers, and we can hopefully address those comments before moving on to the next stage of our report. Can everybody hear me? Am I keeping the mic close enough? Okay, thank you. So once we've addressed public comments and feedback, we can send the report on to HQ, which I said would hopefully be approved sometime in mid-2024. And at that time, we would just be hoping and waiting for congressional authorization of funds in which we can come back and do the additional phases of this project. So design generally lasts up to a year. Construction, I think that's an important part of this. Each of the dams would be its own individual project, so they may not all come out or be addressed all at once. They'd more likely be a phased approach. Each of them would be their own project. And for ecosystem restoration projects, the Corps generally likes to have at least a 5-year contract. So that gives time for construction to happen, but then the systems to settle down, native vegetation to reestablish, any hiccups that might come along the way, erosion, flood events, things that the early construction phase may not be resilient to. We are able to go back in there and address some of those issues before hoisting the project back to the owner. So that would be construction. The Corps generally monitors for up to 10 years after that to make sure that our goals and objectives are being met. And if not, we work with the local sponsor to come back and try to address those goals. And then just as a general rule of thumb, Corps of Engineers projects generally have a 50-year lifespan, but ideally they would persist in perpetuity. Okay, so the two overarching planning objectives for our feasibility study here are to reestablish fluvial geomorphic processes to support riverine habitat and that'd be measured by the predicted increase in quality of riverine habitat. The second overarching objective is to reestablish connectivity for riverine animal assemblages. So we're talking fish, mussels, macroinvertebrates, and that would be measured by the predicted increase in distribution and richness of those species. So the planning objectives in the feasibility study rely on the groundwork that was done by a lot of previous researchers. Here's a few of the studies. I know some of these are dated. There's a lot of great research out there. So I won't spend too much time on the actual data and research that our objectives were based on. So I think there's other folks that can speak to that a little more clearly and even have today. But I'll present just a few graphics that I think help tell the story, and then I'll hopefully open it up to questions for everybody. I think we've seen this today already, but the longitudinal profile of the Fox River. Fox River is somewhat unique in that the more steep parts of the river are in the downstream reaches rather than up in the headwaters. The overall slope of the river is about 2.5 feet per mile, but in the upper reaches, especially Chain of Lakes area, it's as low as 1/3 of a foot per mile. And down in the lower section, St. Charles down towards Yorkville, it's as high as 4.5 feet of drop per mile. So the river changes quite a bit. In that steeper section, that's why you see a lot more dams, because the river's falling quickly. As the impact of the dam doesn't reach as far upstream as it would in a more shallowly sloped stream. So this is the habitat suitability scores for free-flowing, which is the blue bars, and impounded sections of the river. Basically just showing here that the free-flowing sections of the stream provide significantly higher quality habitat than the impounded sections of the stream. And you can see each of the pools along the way. In terms of macroinvertebrates, these first two bars are for free-flowing sections of the river, and they're showing basically habitat suitability for mussels and macroinvertebrates. And you can see here that many of the mussels and macroinvertebrates can inhabit either the impounded or free-flowing sections, but over half of those species strongly prefer free-flowing sections of the river. And that's for a number of reasons, including sediment transport, heterogeneity of the habitat in the stream, and in general water quality that's improved in free-flowing sections of the river. Similarly here, you can see the IBI for fish, the index of biotic integrity scores for each of the pools along the river. The darker shaded areas are the free-flowing sections, and the lighter shading is the impounded section. So you can see the IBI scores are significantly higher for each and every pool in the free-flowing sections of the river. Lastly, looking at fish species fragmentation, I think there's two stories really to be told here. Group A, you see up above, these are highly mobile and migratory species. They really rely on being able to access different sections of the river for their life history cycle. And you can see here, the Dayton Dam serves as an effective barrier for a lot of those species. So you just don't see those species at all upstream of the river. Other ones you can see have made it partially upstream, but they're not making it the rest of the way upstream in the Fox River. Group B is a slightly different story. These species are present throughout the Fox River, up and down, but you can see that their populations are segmented. And generally segmenting populations leads to a lot of adverse impacts to populations, including decreasing genetic diversity and less resilience to perturbations in their environment. These last few slides are just some of the cool fish species that we see along the Fox River. I think they're cool anyway. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. I may not be able to answer all of them, but I'd be happy to take a stab at it or meet with you afterwards and take down your name and hopefully forward your question on to somebody else. We have a large team of people that are working on this project. I'm a planner, biologist, geographer, but I'm not a hydrologist, and I'm not a specialist in fish, macros, or mussels. But with that, I'll open it up. Go ahead.
The Corps has been involved with ecological restoration of rivers a lot.
And degradation.
And degradation. And this thing about dam removal, I mean, we have here an advisory restoration to keep this dam here. And it would be dragging it over the dead bodies of some people this was ever removed. How does the Corps ultimately deal with that? Because that level of over my dead body is going to never end. Is it you just outvote them, or it's a consensus over time? Just put the experience of the Corps in dealing with that pretty tough personal psychological issue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's multiple steps here. One thing I'd like to say is the Corps is providing funding for these efforts, but we have to have a local sponsor. So the local sponsor in this case is the DNR, Fox River Study Group. But when we get into more detailed aspects of the projects, it's going to be the dam owner. And that ranges from some of the municipalities own their own dam. The DNR owns several of the other dams. The authority that the Corps has to do this dam restoration is strictly based on habitat restoration. So it's not based on economic dollars. It's not based on recreation opportunities or sentimental value to the dams. So while we receive a lot of comments for people who have a sentimental tie to the dam, that's not something that there's a right answer to. So I don't think there's a scientific right answer to provide to those folks. It's more looking at the science and the facts. Something I haven't mentioned, and I think some other people mentioned it, Jenny maybe in her paddling talk, these dams are really dangerous, thank you. And they provide a pretty substantial risk to the public. People die on these dams on the Fox River every year, and it's a huge liability for the dam owners. And so I think the sentimental value at some point, it just has to take a back seat to safety and the quality of our environment. Thanks for the question. Go ahead.
I think part of it for some of the dams is also the age of the dams. So the cost to actually replace the dam would be substantial. And so the people with the sentimental value probably aren't going to be willing to pony up the money to replace the dam.
Exactly.
So the age of the dam, I think, is a factor as well.
You're right. Cindy.
Hey, Ryan, always like an opportunity to ask a question. You mentioned the Corps doing 10 years of monitoring after dam removal. So I just wondered, is that type of monitoring work that Corps staff themselves will do, or will they be looking at like Illinois EPA data?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have a complete answer, but we definitely rely on outside folks. For most of our ecosystem restoration projects, we do a lot of our own monitoring. So we're out there doing flora and fauna surveys. Unfortunately, water quality is not under the purview of the Corps of Engineers, so we can't justify any of our work that way. But there's lots of other agencies that do that work, and we definitely rely on them. Do you have time for one more? Go ahead.
Let's have a question and comment. The Army Corps is now moving and looking at the idea of naturalized flood control. Are you familiar with the topic, and can you make a comment or two? And I realize that's probably a little bit above your level.
Yeah, so
Could you repeat the question, please?
yeah, he was saying that, and let me know if I get it wrong.
The Army Corps is now looking at naturalized flood control. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, and maybe he can explain.
Yeah, so nothing on the Fox River here, and these dams do not serve a flood control purpose. So that's not part of this work here. I'm working on other Corps projects, dams in central Indiana. And in those areas, we're looking at modifying the flows from our dams to try to better meet the needs of species downstream of those habitats. So I don't think I completely answered your question, but I'd be happy to chat afterwards.
What my point is, they're talking about now, instead of developing along rivers, you know, put conservation upstream. Look at conservation measures rather than putting in dikes and levees.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm not sure what that's heading yet, but it's not on the national level.
Yes, I think maybe to get to your point a little more, the Corps has a lot of missions that we operate under, authorized by Congress. One of those missions now is aquatic ecosystem restoration. So not only navigation, flood risk management, but we're also focused on restoring and, quite frankly, undoing a lot of the wrongs that we did in the past. Any more, or are we done? Thank you guys for your time. I'll be happy to share.
Yeah, I just respond to